Hello Year 10 English students. In this video, I'm going to help you think through the process of unpacking an essay question. I think when you start and you've just got that question and you've got, and it's fresh, that's the most daunting place to be. So I'm hoping by the end of this video, you'll have some ideas about how you can just make that start and get into it. Because once you're into it, the rest of the process, I think, flows a bit more easily. So I didn't want to do it for one of the questions that I'm actually giving you. So I've got this question instead. Discuss the extent to which Bob Ewell can be considered a victim in To Kill a Mockingbird. It's the sort of question I'm likely to give you. It's similar to the sorts of questions I give you. And so I'm going to demonstrate, and I haven't really rehearsed this, but I'm going to demonstrate what I'd do if I sat down, say, in an exam, and that was the question presented in front of me. I'll give you a few strategies for how you can get your ideas down on paper and start thinking through and processing them. Now, this isn't a magic bullet. This isn't a magic potion, that just solves all your problems. You've got to do the thinking. You've got to have the ideas. You've got to have some stuff to work with. So if you don't have that, I guess you've got to go back to the novel. You've got to go back to your notes. You've got to go back to previous lessons and get some of the ideas and themes into your head, some quotes, some bits of evidence, some events from the novel into your head so that you've got something to work with. But I think most of you have that. And so this is to help get those ideas out so that you can begin to see, okay, here's a few different ways I could approach this topic. Here's how I could begin writing. And from there, as I said, I think it gets easier and easier. So the first thing I do when I look at a question is I try and break it apart. So there's three parts to this question that I think we need to particularly look at. So let's use some different colors here. So first of all, what's the main part of the question, or the topic of the question? Bob Ewell can be considered a victim. Now already I'm thinking that's pretty interesting because Bob Ewell, he's the villain of the novel. So to say that he's a victim, that's pretty interesting. So this part of the question we can call sort of the topic or the content of the question. But there's a few other really important things we need to unpack in this question. So I'm going to just change color for a moment. The next thing to look at is the task word, or the command term, sometimes it's called. This is the word that's giving you the instruction, what you actually have to do. Here it is the word discuss. There's many other command terms or task words, different people call them different things. You might be asked to do something like compare. If you're asked to compare, then you have to look at two different things and say, how are they similar, how are they different? Contrast means look at how they're different. You might be asked to say evaluate. To evaluate means to judge something. Sorry, it's hard to write on this screen. To evaluate means to judge something. Say, is it good or bad, true or false? And then to give some evidence and weigh that up. We've been asked to discuss. Now discuss, I like discuss because discuss is a very broad one. We get to sort of, I guess some other words for discuss could be sort of just explore this idea. We can weigh up the extent to which we think it's true or false. We can approach it in a whole range of ways when the word is discuss. So I really like this. So I'm going to rub out compare and evaluate because they're not our task words, but I might leave the word explore because I think that's not a bad thing, a bad way to think of discuss. I get to discuss it. I get to say what I think about it. I get to, not that I write in first person, but I can say what I think about it. I can give different sides to the argument. That's what it means to discuss. So I'll leave that word explore. Now, the other word that I think is really important, and again, I'll switch to a different color here. Blue, that looks nice. The other important word in this sentence and in this question, maybe you can see it. The word extent. Now, I call this, and I'm just making up this term, I call this the key word because I've noticed often essay questions will have some kind of key word, not always. And you could say it's part of the topic, but this word is so important. And it's likely that the question that you look at will have a keyword as well. This is the word that you need to really unlock to help you explore the topic better. So extent means how much, right? So to what extent can Bob Ewell be considered a victim? So I could say absolutely 100% he is a victim. I could say, well, he can partially be considered a victim, right? To some extent. Or I could say to no extent, he is not a victim. He is pure villainy. So that's what that word extent means. So I really should be thinking about that here. So I've got my command term. I need to explore this idea, but I've also got my keyword, extent, how much. So I'm actually going to put that in. I'm going to write how much. So I've got some, I guess, some synonyms there. I've got discuss sort of means explore. Extent sort of means how much is this topic true. So I'm going to put them on my page. So what you should be doing with your own essay topic is write it down maybe in the middle of the page, and we'll do a brainstorm. I'm going to demonstrate with this one. I've already started, and you can follow along and try doing it for your own essay topic as well. So the first thing is pull it apart. What's the topic or the content of the question? What is the command term? Maybe try and put that in your own words. And what is the and is there a key word? And maybe you can think about again some synonyms for that key word. So pause this video now and start with that. Start just by unpacking it, and then come back to this video, and we'll do a bit more of a brainstorm in just a moment. I'm going to rub this out, and then you can, while you're pausing, and we'll come back to it. Rub, 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 rub. Okay. Hopefully you've paused. You've gone. You've highlighted a few things in the question for yourself, and now you're ready to do a bigger brainstorm. So, what I mean by that, what I like to do is I sometimes do it as a concept map like this, and that's how I'll do it here. I sort of like the visuals of it, a concept map where you have ideas coming off, and do it that way. Or honestly, when I was a student, the way I usually did it was not as a concept map, but as a just a list. I would just open a Word document or whatever, and I'd just write my ideas. And I just write down all my ideas, everything I could think of, every bit of, here's a quote, there's another quote. Is that one very good? I don't know. I'll put it down. I might need it later. Oh, here's an idea. Maybe I could make this point. Maybe I could make that point. Ooh, what if someone said this, this counter argument? Okay, I'll write that down. Oh, how would I rebut that counter argument? Okay, write that down. And then once I had this really long, messy list, then I'd start to group things, and I'd start to say, okay, how do these ideas fit together? What sort of categories or buckets can I put them in? And then they become your main points, and you work on from there. So let's have a go doing it now. I'll just do a few things, just enough to illustrate the idea. So discuss the extent to which Bob Ewell can be considered a victim. So, well, what's some evidence, first of all, that does show that he's a victim? Well, actually, you know what? It's easier to think about the opposite side. He's not a victim. He's a bad guy. So I'm going to start actually by thinking about all the ways that he's terrible. So he's abusive to his family. Oh my goodness, it's hard to write on this screen. To his own family. He's a drunk. He is, of course, he falsely accused Tom Robinson. He's racist. He doesn't send his children to school. You can see I can go on and on and on like this. So there's lots of ways he's actually a villain. He's actually a really bad guy in all these examples. So what I might do even is use a bit of color. I've already noticed that I've got a bit of a main idea here, that I want to point out all the ways that he's actually not a victim but a villain. I want to point out all the ways that he's a bad dude. I didn't use the word, I said it aloud, but I didn't write down that he is racist. Oh, and of course, spoiler alert, he tries to kill children. He attacks children. Right? So all these ideas obviously fit together, because they're all about how he's a villain. Let's get down some other ideas. So he's very poor. That's important to note. that doesn't seem to be writing. What's going on here? Oh, there it comes. So he's very poor. You know what, this idea that he's drunk, I'm actually thinking that can fit two different things. He's got an addiction. He has a real problem. I'm just thinking about this idea of poverty, and I'm thinking about the society's attitude. Oh, and about drunkenness as well. The society's attitude towards people who are poor or seen as trash. I know there's a really good quote from Aunt Alexandra. I can't remember where it is in the novel. I'll have to refer back to my notes, but I'm going to write it down. The idea of classism that I've talked about before. I'm going to write down something about trash. Aunt Alexandra quote. I can't remember. I think she's actually talking about Walter Cunningham, but I think maybe that could tie into this idea of being poor, of being and of being classist. So I definitely need to look up that quote when I come to it later, and I can keep going and keep going. So there's the scene where they're describing the houses and how poor, how terrible, poor not in terms of poverty, though that too, but poor as in bad quality their home is. So the comparison of the houses, the African American, the Negro houses, to Bob Yule's house. So I'm just going to write bad house. That'll do me. And again, I need to look that up again and see if I can see something about that. I remember somewhere in the novel as well, it talks about Bob Yule is that everyone forgets about him after the trial. It's like it gave him a moment of glory amongst the white townspeople, but in the end they wanted nothing to do with him. So I need to look that up as well. So you can see there's lots of things here where I don't have, I can't remember the exact detail I want, but I'm going to get all these ideas down, and I'm not being self-critical. Anything I think of, I'm going to chuck it down on the page, because this is my brainstorming stage and I want as much information as I can. And once you've done that, once you've got as many ideas as you possibly can, and you, of course you can come back to this and add more and more and more to it, that's when I'd go through and I jump the gun a bit by highlighting in blue there. Maybe I'll choose a reddy pinky color for, oh, that looks a bit too nice. I'll choose red for where I'm saying he's a victim. So now I can start thinking, okay, what other categories do I have? So I've obviously got one here about his poverty. I've got, so maybe I'll leave out drunk for now, but the bad house, his poverty, classism, and maybe I can draw in the Aunt Alexandra quote as well. And then, so I've got this hanging one, drunkenness. Maybe I want to say something about, I remember, that's right, at the school, no Yule goes to school. And I think that's right in like chapter 2. I'm going to write chapter 2 question mark. And that's got me thinking about intergenerational I was going to say poverty, intergenerational poverty, but it's more than that. It's intergenerational, I can't think of the right term, but there've been problems and problems going back generations with the Yules. Intergenerational problems, I'll just write for now. I'll try and think of a better word than problems down the track. Okay, so now I'm seeing another category here, so I'll choose a different color, maybe green. So intergenerational problems might be another one of my main points. We've got drunkenness. His father was a drunk. His father was a drunk. No Yule goes to school, so this problem is persisting, and again, going back generations, they're never getting an education, and so they're never breaking this cycle. So maybe that's another point there. Okay, so this is I'm only scratching the surface here. Every time I go to the next step, I'm like, oh, here's a few other ideas. Oh, here's another idea. But this is enough to illustrate my point. Once you've got all your ideas down, every quote, every bit of evidence, the next thing is to try to group them. You can see I've started to group them, and maybe I can start thinking about what are my main points going to be. Maybe I can already start to see, okay, I could have a whole section of my essay on this topic and this topic and this topic. So definitely I want to have one here that's like a rebuttal. I want to say he is a villain. And I'm already, that's not how you spell villain, Gat. Come on. So I'm going to highlight that in the blue color because that goes with that one. And I'm already thinking that might be a good place to start. And I've got them all neatly organized there, so I'll put a nice box around them. That might be a good place to start, to say we all know he's a villain, right? I'm sort of getting that argument out of the way early, so maybe that'll be my first argument. Again, not locking it in, just an idea. But maybe I'll start there, show, yes, he's definitely a villain, and then from there I can build, but he's also a victim. Maybe that's how I can approach this topic. Red, what have I got here? I think it's the idea of classism. So I think this is, I don't know where I'd put that in my argument, but I think this red idea is the main point's all going to be about classism, that he is a victim of a form of prejudice. He is a vile, racist man, but he is also a victim of prejudice in that people look down on him because of his family and their status. And then maybe that could lead into intergenerational problems, or maybe intergenerational problems can lead into that. I'll need to think about the best flow and link there. But definitely another one is this idea of intergenerational problems, that he is a victim of this ongoing cycle of poverty and neglect. Okay, I've actually got a pretty good start to an essay here. I've got 3 main points. I reckon I could come up with more. I might end up with 4 or 5 main points. Maybe, you know what could be interesting? Comparing Bob and Tom. I wonder if there's any idea there. Again, you want to be sensitive. You want to recognize that Tom's definitely, you don't want to minimize what's happened to Tom Robinson. But maybe I can say there's actually some similarities in the way the town treats them. Maybe there's something in that. So I could come up with potentially more points. But I've got enough here now that I'm starting to see the flow of my essay, and hopefully it's something I can work with. Just before I finish off this video, the next step is to say, if these are my main ideas, once I've got all my ideas out and have started to group them, and I've said these are my main points, now I can go back and try to think, what's my contention? What's my one point that brings it all together? Maybe I want to say Bob Ewell is a terrible person. However, he is also a victim. Why is he a victim? Well, because the same prejudice views that he uses to destroy Tom Robinson's life, the same type of prejudice he holds towards Tom Robinson, other people hold towards him. Maybe it's something to do with that, and it's that way of looking at him that shapes him and leads him to be the man who he is. So maybe my contention is something like, I might just see if I can I type? I think I can. So maybe my contention is something like Bob Ewell is a victim. Or maybe I'll start with, he is a villain, but he is also a victim. I like the alliteration, villain, victim, even though villain's a bit of a funny term to use. He is a villain, but he is also a victim. The same prejudice that he holds against Tom Robinson is aimed at him and has shaped him to be the man he is. I don't love the wording there, but it's something to work with, isn't it? Can I move that? Oh, no, I can't. Maybe with this. No, okay, we'll just leave it there. Oh, my head's covering it. I've ruined everything. I can move my head. How's that? So Bob Ewell is a villain, but he is also a victim. The same prejudice that he holds against Tom Robinson, is aimed at him and has shaped him to be the man he is. I think I can finesse that a bit more, but you can see how I've gone from those main points to this contention, which I can start working with. I can refine it, I can shape it, but I want to say something about, yeah, he holds prejudiced views towards others, but other people hold prejudiced views towards him. And that has, and it's those problems, those long-term problems that have caused him to be the terrible person who he is. Something around that. Okay, enough talking. This has ended up being a very long video. But I hope you found it useful. I hope seeing me go through that process gives you some ideas about how you can go through that process for yourself. So choose an essay topic. Start by unpacking it. What's the task word? Is there a keyword? Is there a task word or command term? What's the content of it? What's the actual question or topic? And then just brainstorm as much as you can. Once you've got all your ideas down, see how you can group them. Once you've grouped them, think, okay, these are my main points. Maybe I can start thinking about how to order them. And from that, if that's the content of my essay, what am I really trying to say? And try putting that in one interesting, insightful sentence, because that is your contention. Good luck. Can't wait to see what you come up with.